I don't need to worry about this thing, right? Because I don't need to worry about this thing because I'm...
No. Yeah, if you're less than you can hear you, you'll be... Yeah, okay.
Gotcha.
Welcome everyone. I am Dushka Jane Zeller and I work here at Sealaska Heritage Institute in our art department. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone to please silence your phones and that there is no food or drink allowed in this sacred space. I welcome you here today to the third lecture in our series of lectures under the theme titled Language Programs Around Alaska, School-Based Indigenous Language Revitalization Models. Sealaska Heritage Institute is currently supporting indigenizing education efforts by providing internships and classroom experiences to Indigenous high schoolers who are planning on becoming future teachers, scholarships for Indigenous college students who are currently working towards becoming teachers in Alaska, and a community of practice to support current Indigenous teachers in their teaching practices by gaining more knowledge on how to indigenize their education as well as the education they are providing for their students. The Indigenizing Education for Alaska grant is interested in not only supporting Indigenous students in becoming teachers in Alaska, but also in the collaboration and growth of Alaska's current Indigenous teachers. Through this series, you will have an opportunity to listen to a number of Indigenous teachers who provide education in a number of different ways to their communities, and you will have the opportunity to ask them questions about their experiences and efforts to indigenize education in Alaska. Shugowab Alfie Price is Tsimshian, Haida, and Tlingit, and is Gishpatwaden, which is the Tsimshian Kilauea clan, Gitlan tribe from the House of the Blue-billed Duck. He's one of the co-founders of Juneau, Sm'algyax, and Tsimshian Language Learners Group, along with Nancy Barnes and Alex Rohab. The group was started in November 2015. This lecture will be a brief description on how Juneau, Sm'algyax, Tsimshian Language Learners group do their work, and will also address the topics given to him about the education model of the group's classes, the goals of the group, and the impacts of the group's learners. At the end of the lecture, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Those tuning in online will have the opportunity to ask questions in the comment section. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Alfie to the stage.
Geez, I just only get 2 hours, right? And why? Before we get started, I'd like to teach you a little song, or I'm going to sing the song and you're going to help me. So in S'm'algyax, to say clap your hands, we say dashkin. Now when I say dashkin du, I want you to clap twice. Dashkin du. Oh, look, William. And then to stomp your feet, we say klakshashi. Oh, and when I say klakshashi, you stomp twice. All right, and then I'm going to say we am hound. That means speak up. And when I say we am hound, I want you to say waiwa. I want you to say it with feeling, so let's give a little fist pump. Waiwa. Oh, look, William. And then I'm going to want you to do it all together. So we're going to go dashkindu, klakshashi, waiwa. All right, are you ready? Okay, I'm going to do the singing main part. Some of you already know this, so please chime in. Other than that, just listen to my beautiful voice. Tsida shimluam gordon dashkindu. Tsida shimluam gordon dashkindu. Tsida shimluam gordon, tsida shimluam gordon, tsida shimluam gordon dashkindu. Tsida shimluam gordon klakshashi. Tsida shimluam gordon klakshashi. Zeta shimluam gordon, zeta shimluam gordon, zeta shimluam gordon klakshashi. Zeta shimluam gordon, we am hound. Zeta shimluam gordon, we am hound. Zeta shimluam gordon, zeta shimluam gordon, zeta shimluam gordon, we am hound. Yeah. Zeta Shimluam Gordon Shagite Wan. Why? Say the Shimluam Gordon Shagite Wan. Zeda Shimluam Gordon, Zeda Shimluam Gordon, Zeda Shimluam Gordon Shagite Wan. Am Zubsham. Good job, everybody. And when I say it's like an expression that something just hit the spot. You often hear it when we're eating food, but you also hear it for other things that just strike you, just so. I wanted to open with that song. This is one of the first things that we learned as a group from our teacher, Shugaina, Donamay Roberts. First language speaker, has been teaching for a long time. She was one of our very first teachers. She came to Juneau and taught a bunch of us. And she uses song very effectively. The words that we learn in the song stick with us. And sometimes when you're studying the language, you'll hear a word or phrase, and you remember it from the song. And it's a good connection. So thank you all for opening with a good song with me. Clan leaders, noble women, matriarchs, people in line for chieftainship, council members of the clan leader, speaker for the chiefs, children of clan leaders, all the children of Git Aug, that's Akwanani. I'd like to, first of all, thank Git Aug, the Akwan, whose land we are learning our language on. It's not just an acknowledgement of whose land it is, but we had a meeting with the clan leader and asked permission to do our work, and we were given permission and also their blessing. So I feel pretty strongly that when you actually connect with the people whose land you're on, you build stronger connections. I feel like we have a pretty good relationship with Akwan. I want to thank SHI for hosting this, for giving us a chance to share who we are and what it is we're doing. And I'd like to thank our Sualayamsk, our current Sualayamsk. We've had many teachers over the years, many helpers. And I've only been given so much time, so I'm not going to tell you everybody. But I'd like to mention a few that are currently helping us. Shugaina, who I mentioned, Donamay Roberts, is teaching through UAS. And you can register for these classes for free. And she's doing really good work. Ashley Dow in Ketchikan has been our teacher. And she really brings a sense of who we are and the importance of our language, not just the language, but the reasons why we say the things we do and why we follow these traditions. Simsodam Newsome, Dr. Michael D'Angeli, who actually came here to Juneau for a year and really led us when we were struggling and gave us a huge boost. And even after she left, she put us in contact with fluent speakers, and she still joins us herself today to help us. And recently we've had Segolita, Edward Innes in Canada, joining us on Zoom. First language speaker, very patient, very loving, very much invested in sharing what he knows of our language. We are the S'm'algyax Learners Group. We used to call ourselves the Juneau S'm'algyax Learners Group, but it's a bit of a misnomer now because now we have probably more students in Washington and or BC than we do right here in Juneau. We began on November 21st, 2015, and our initial learning model at the time was we just practiced what we knew. We had a few printed materials, a few sound files, and just our memories of things that we had learned in the past. Our initial goals were that we just didn't want to forget what we learned, and we wanted a chance to practice it. The impact on the learners at that time, we had fun, and we wanted to learn more. Who we are. I've given many speeches in the past about our story, our origins, but I'm just going to touch briefly on who we are now. We're an independent assemblage of Sm'algyax learners. We operate without grants or any specific curricula. We work together because of the love of our language. Our sessions are free to attend, and we strive to maintain a safe space. We don't assign grades. We don't even actually take attendance, though Nancy does like to get pictures of us on the Zoom screen. So we have somewhat of a record of who's been online. We rely on help from teachers and other supporters. We volunteer our time and sometimes our own money. Shugaina has been our teacher the longest and is currently teaching UAS classes. Her examples provided a lot of the framework that we use now for our learners. Ashley Dow has led us for months at a time and teaches not only language but tradition and the worldview of our forebears. We can't learn these things from any book. Simplodum Newsome, Dr. Michael Dansley, was our in-person teacher for a year, and when she left, she kept helping us and put us in touch with first language speakers and brought them to teach us online. She also organized grammar intensive with fluent speakers and a linguist. She herself provides a lot of guidance in our learning still. Gimshil Hait Gibao, Emily Bryant in Tsimshian, British Columbia, now brings Sagolita, first language speaker, to us via Zoom. Emily also finds other ways to support us and is also learning right along with us. I mentioned we haven't relied on grants, but we've had financial support from the Hike Foundation and Kíl and Sm'algyax, which we use to try to support our presenters and learners to continue learning, and fees such as our Zoom account. We use social media like Instagram to share what we know, and we've leveraged our online presence when the pandemic lockdown forced us to move from in-person meetings to Zoom sessions. It was when we invited our followers to learn with us that we realized that we needed to start a beginner section. Most of the folks had never had any experience with our language other than watching our videos. Several of those who joined us at that time are still with us regularly and contribute as well as learn with us. The fact is, some of them are teaching me now. So I'm just going to list some of our social media, and my good friend Asoik is going to be dropping the links in the chat. We have our Instagram, Sm'algyax Learners Instagram. We started that maybe a year after we started learning, and it's been going ever since. I think we've got over 1,200 followers. So sign up. We've got a bunch of videos on YouTube. We've got recorded sessions of people who have come in to present to us or some of our lessons. We've got a SoundCloud. There's some beginning language on there. There's some examples of introductions. There's some stories that have been translated to our language. Not our social media, but there's a podcast by Roots and Stems, hosted by Sealaska Heritage, that was done a while ago before the pandemic, and it's one of the things that brought some of our learners to us, that got their attention that we exist. KTOO did a documentary about us in their revision series. They interviewed a bunch of us, including those who live far away, and wrote a beautiful story about who we are and how we do things during the time of COVID. We're featured in a podcast, Tongue Unbroken, hosted by Juneau. Barbara Belk is one of our distant learners from Washington, and myself talk about how we did things during the lockdown and what it meant to have our learners from far away join us. Now I'll give you a brief snapshot of a typical Saturday S'm'algyax session. When I was asked to talk about these things, I didn't really know how to approach it because I'm not an academic, I'm not a linguist, I'm just a dude who wanted to learn my language. So to me, our work is finding a need for our language use and filling it. And that's what drives us. Our language drives us. Usually we start with a check-in with everyone to ask how people are doing. Sometimes we ask about the weather, or what they're eating that day, or what they're doing, or will do, or have done, or what have you. Sometimes, and we haven't done this for a while, we start by practicing our introductions in our language. I'll usually ask if anyone has anything to share. Sometimes they're excited to have learned in our language, or something that they're excited to have learned in our language, or maybe they want to sing us a song in our language, or sometimes other languages. Or maybe they'd like to read us an adauch, which is our oral history, our true tellings. Or maybe they'd like to tell us a dirty limerick. No one's taken me up on this yet. Or if anyone has any questions. And then I'll usually have queued up something that I've been working on or that we've worked on together, and we'll go over it and give folks an opportunity to practice saying whatever it is we're working on. We often do at least one song per session. We got the pleasure of doing that earlier, and Nancy is usually our song leader for those. Sometimes we have guest presenters, which you'll see on the YouTube link there, who share with us about topics of interest to us, such as canoe knowledge. Johan Atkinson provided that. Art terminology by Davy Boxley. Storytelling by Lily Hope. LGBTQ plus issues by Tristan Waibu. Or other language teachers will come in, like Joss Kwan, a Haida teacher, to share their methods. For consecutive sessions, we've been given lessons by Ashley Dow and Simsodam Newsom. During the lockdown, we were also a place of support and connection. We often went over the 2 or 3 hours we scheduled. We were doing language learning, but we were also functioning as a support group during that time. At least once, we went over 5 hours. One of our current exercises is to look up vocabulary words and then find example sentences in the dictionaries. And recently, now this is the cool part, we started making up our own example sentences with what we know. We do this work together, and we practice speaking the words and phrases. So to me, that's a typical current Saturday S'm'algyax session. I mentioned that we started beginner section, and we added that to the beginning of our regular session, so we had an hour of just the very basics for probably a couple of years, and then we finally put a hold on it because we didn't have any more brand new learners, but we're always willing to do it again, so don't be scared. All right, let's talk about our teaching and learning model. Now, I didn't know quite how to approach this, so as we do most things, we did it together. I reached out to a bunch of our learners, and I asked them to tell me what do they think our educational model is. Here's one. Our group focuses on collaboration, cooperative and interest-based learning. Members will often bring an idea, a topic, or questions for the group for us to focus on, dive into, and then expand upon. We could probably refer to ourselves as a co-op. Members buy in with their time and interest, and they get returns based on that. Another one said, a variety of models. Call and response method, where learners repeat what is on our shared screen in the language, giving everyone a chance to speak in Sm'algyax and to hear the other learners say the phrases. We've also used the gray morning method, using images. I would show you the images that we do, but I had to sign an NDA. So, one of the first models we used was TPR, or total physical response. This is one of the things that Shugani uses very effectively, and Nancy carried on the tradition for us. It's a good way for beginners to start. Donna Mae Roberts calls this learning through osmosis, consisting of sounds, gestures, and actions. And if you haven't seen TPR, somebody will say a thing like, manga an. That means raise your arm. And then you're required to just do the thing. You don't have to say it, you don't have to repeat it, just listen and do it. And sometimes Nancy will have us running around the room, twirling like ballerinas or spinning on our bums on the floor. We call it Tsimshian aerobics sometimes. We often start with vocabulary and move towards putting sentences together and learning what joiners to use. We also have learned through songs, as I mentioned. Another person said, I would say our group has a community learning model. Each person receives and contributes as much as they can. We learn together by helping each other. And also a hybrid model that fosters multifaceted learning and gentle yet enthusiastic encouragement in a non-judgmental environment. It has never been said that criticism is not tolerated, but that is the overwhelming feeling. The main facilitator has a gentle and kind manner that is modeled for all the participants. Oh. All of the time, the class is safe and respectful. And somebody said, I'm not sure there is a model that is named in existence that adequately captures what our group is and the work that we do. We're not quite doing exclusively immersion learning, although that's one component of what we work toward to incorporate. And some of our learners' teachers do hold space for immersion time. We're not quite utilizing a class teacher structure, although that is often also a component, and many of our learners enhance their learning by also teaching. I suspect what has been built is a new way of approaching this type of work, but if I were to name it myself, I would say we're utilizing a community-led, adaptive, mixed methods approach to heritage language learning that works to build learners some Sm'algyax knowledge and use in real life, rather than only in classroom or professional settings. I generally don't think of the work our group does in terms of teaching learning models, though, and I think it's more accurate to say that what we're doing is community work with community members. Yes, we're working on reinvigorating our language, and that's our primary goal focus, and it's so much more than just that. And someone said, every learner is a teacher. And my favorite one was from Dr. D'Angeli. Let me see if I can say this. Decolonial, non-hierarchical, learner-led, and learner-centered model of teaching and learning. When she first said this, I was like a deer in the headlights. But I took some time and unpacked this. And really, this is a very concise, accurate way to describe us. I feel like because we don't have a specific structure, because we let the language lead us, that to me describes the decolonial part. non-hierarchical, learner-led, and learner-centered model. And that's very accurate because usually we don't have any fluent speakers online with us. We don't have any trained teachers or linguists. But we come with our needs and our goals together as learners. And then the next question we were asked is, what are the impacts of our work on our members? Beyond the obvious benefit of learning our language together, members have shared with us how our group and the work we are doing has helped improve their mental health and inspire them to continue schooling or make positive career changes. During the pandemic, we were a reliable and safe place for people to socialize online and work toward a common goal. When we know that isolation can be very taxing mentally and emotionally. Oh, Simone. I have watched learners who only knew a few words who are now talking in complete sentences. And learners like me arrive timid, hurting, and disconnected, dealing with self-doubt and learned judgment. The impact of our work is personal and communal healing, gaining individual strength and supportive community. And somebody said, the growing pride, grounding effects, and confidence building are immeasurable in the attendees. Students attend from far and wide, sometimes without access to a home reserve, native speaker of S'm'algyax, or any written materials, but all with a yearning to know more S'm'algyax. The welcoming nature of the Zoom class and teachers has made a delightful community that we are privileged to be part of. And the group has taught and inspired me about more than just language. The group has taught me more about my people's heritage and customs than I ever knew. The group taught me that you cannot sit on your laurels and wait for change to come to you. If you want to see change and you want the world to be a better place, you have to be the change. You have to make the change. No one else is going to do it for you. Oh, Sim'aut. All right. This next one, one of our learners pretty much sent me a paper. She wrote a whole entire paper, and I absolutely love it. And she's got a very good way with words, so. First and foremost, I think the work this group does strengthens Tsimshian community and would go so far as to say that the group creates pathways for people who are otherwise unable to connect with Tsimshian community to do so. Learners who join in any capacity, but particularly as beginners and or those coming from outside of geographic Tsimshian communities, get something immediately from their first session. Our space is held with intention and care for all people who show up. And unless someone proves they are unsafe to our community, the invitation is never rescinded. People are welcomed and accepted as they are and are encouraged to be present as their whole selves to whatever degree individuals are comfortable. It might be one of the only spaces some folks have that kind of social interaction safely. We are inclusive of all people's identities. Our community becomes stronger as we build up participation. Learners are encouraged to ask questions and inquire about S'm'algyax words and phrases that they relate to or that they want to be able to express. In this way, our language teaching is adaptable to meet our learners' needs and desires within this work and helps people find meaningful reasons to stick with it. Learning our language includes learning our ways of being Tsimshian people. With learning our words and our expressions, we develop an understanding of how our ancestors interacted with and shaped our world. Many of us do not live on our traditional homelands, but carried in our DNA is everything that our ancestors gave to us. And with learning our language and culture, many of us have found deeper understanding of ourselves as individuals and who we are as Tsimshian people. People have found themselves and found purpose by joining the Juneau S'm'algyax learners. Specifically, I have recognized that my own ways of being, the way I interact with and process the world around me, has always been informed by my Tsimshian identity, even when I wasn't aware. Now that my ways of being have been validated, that I understand that there are others with similar experiences and similar reflections of life, I walk in this world with more confidence and with more drive to not only do better for myself, but to do better and good work for my loved ones and my community. Some of our members have gone on to return to school and earn degrees. Others have begun a lifelong journey of learning Chilkat and Ravenstail weaving. Some of us have found employment working with or for our communities and people. Many of our learners and teachers are including their young children in the learning. And first language S'm'algyax speakers are being raised. Waiawa. More folks are engaging in language reinvigoration work beyond our group sessions. Friendships and familial connections have been forged between members that otherwise might not have connected. And our network of community that is supportive and truly takes to heart the holding each other up part of our Southeast traditional values continues to inspire and motivate people to achieve fulfilling and wonderful things. Learners become teachers. Learning by teaching is another powerful way to increase knowledge of S'm'algyax. In essence, as Tsimshian people, learning our language helps us be whole. So that was the impact on our learners section. And I wasn't entirely expecting the input from our learners to be very testimonial, very uplifting, and I was excited to read the words of people that I speak to every week. All right, let's talk about the goals of our group as we see them. We are building a community of language learners who support each other in our shared goal of becoming fluent speakers. This one hit me kind of hard. Here in Lingít in Juneau, we don't have any first language speakers. We don't have any trained teachers or linguists. And when we first started, it was hard to connect with people who could help us. But after we stuck with it for a while, we started getting more and more help. So when we first started, even thinking that I could become what is considered fluent was just so far out of reach that I put it off. I just chose to forget it. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to learn what I can. All right. Another person said, goals of our group, have conversations through questions and answers. Another goal I have heard is to attract a younger generation to join the Saturday group on a regular basis. A goal I have heard expressed from many of our learners is to spend more time with advanced or fluent speakers in places such as Metlakatla, Alaska, or in BC, British Columbia, or even Ketchikan, which is kind of close to Metlakatla in British Columbia. This would be a dream come true to do this several times a year, or bring them here to Juneau. Waiawa. I would say the goals of our group include increasing the use of understanding S'm'algyax by providing a safe and welcoming environment for consistent practice. Another person said, save S'm'algyax. Increase interest and participation in S'm'algyax learning. Increase accessibility to S'm'algyax learning. Develop S'm'algyax teachers. Strengthen Tsimshian community in person and across the diaspora over wide geography. Increase individual family community well-being. Preserve traditional ancestral knowledge and ways of being. Support learners and teachers where they are at. And probably my favorite, the goal is simple: to encourage more people to speak S'm'algyax. The task is huge, but the goal is simple. So those are the three questions that were given to me by my good friend Leah here at Sealaska Heritage Institute, and they really sparked some pretty neat conversations among our group, and it was good to pause and reflect on who we are and where we're at. Now I wanted to ask some folks, I mentioned earlier our social media presence. We started it kind of on a lark to share what we knew. I knew that if we shared what we know, it would cause us to practice, and we would want to put out good language. We want to get it right. And so we spent so many hours doing this, and I'm really pleased to see, especially a couple of our members who don't live here, who are here in the room with us. I'm just very, very happy. So here's a nice comprehensive list of things about our social media presence. Social media is a double-edged sword, but without question it has become effectively ubiquitous for folks who live in the US or Canada, where most of our learners reside. Social media is certainly limited in what it can offer. It can't offer holistic learning spaces that will meet everyone's needs. Internet safety cannot generally be ensured. And social media does quite often come with the risk of digital infiltration by bad actors, scams, racism, misogyny, Zoom bombing, and so forth. What social media is exceptionally powerful at offering in our Sm'algyax work is the ability to reach and invite learners. I myself was contacted through Facebook to join after commenting to nobody in particular that the language I wish I knew was S'm'algyax. Short-form videos on social media provide a great opportunity for people to experience our language as intended by hearing it. Learners going about their day can experience our language and learn new content even when they are not able to participate in our learning groups. And at times when these groups aren't in session, or at times when our groups aren't in session, new learners are also able to hear our language, often for the first time, which can help to demystify and introduce them to S'm'algyax. While these videos are generally short in duration, certainly a lot of work and thought goes into developing and preparing them. That itself is a powerful practice in learning. Social media groups allow for learners and teachers to engage on their own time and support each other in S'm'algyax learning. Social media increases accessibility. Not for everyone. There are plenty of people who are not social media savvy or prefer not to use such platforms. However, with so much of the general population spending a significant amount of time on social media platforms, it is crucial for groups and programs that are hoping to continue growing and expanding to continuously reach new potential participants in that way. Until S'm'algyax is once again a fluently spoken language in our Tsimshian communities, it's likely that social media will remain a powerful tool in reaching folks where they are, creating bridges and pathways for people to join in this work, and uplifting our work and each other as we go. And I'd like to just add to that doing our Instagram, recording lessons is, I mentioned this earlier, it requires us to do well at it. It's good practice, it helps us get better. It's a lot of fun. If you've ever seen our Instagram, a lot of them are played pretty straight. We'll be given a word or phrases and we'll just say it. We'll write translations, but it's generally all in the language. But sometimes we have a lot of fun. Some of them are hilarious. There are a couple we made when somebody had to leave and we were recording parting greetings. And you could feel the sadness in those ones too. You heard some of our members talk about personal growth through our learning together, forging connections with each other, and most significantly to me is a means to reclaim our cultural identity. One of the things we learned when we started learning our language and our traditions, and it was a startling thing and sad to realize that not a single one of us had a Tsimshian name. And due to the way that our recent ancestors were brought to Alaska, we had to put away all the traditions and the knowledges and the stations that made that possible. So we had to reach out to elders, clan leaders in other places and ask for help. And we got it. Shagop Tuayu, my Tsimshian name is Shagop. It means wave maker. And I was just given that not long ago. And we've got some more work to do for our group. Our learners are doing big things. Barbara, one of the folks who weighed in quite a bit, was inspired to go back to college, and she graduated, and during her graduation ceremony she got up and gave a speech in our language. Tom, one of the folks who weighed in, works for an insurance company, and he was analyzing their company and the way they do things, and he realized that they needed an organization, a branch, I forget the acronym, I'm sorry, Tom, but to include Native Americans all across the country. And so he began that, and he's in leadership of it. Pamela Post is, you might have heard the name, she's a reporter for the Canadian Broadcasting Company. She joined us at the start of the pandemic. And I'll read something that she had to say too. But she put out a couple of documentaries. One, The Tale of Two Metlakatlas. If you have a chance, I highly recommend checking it out. Pamela sent me this message this morning. Pamela Postiwayu. I live in Vancouver, BC. I have been welcomed as a member of the Juneau Sm'algyax Learners Group for the past 3 years. It has been life-changing for me in terms of true, deep connection to Tsimshian community language, culture, and kinship, despite the miles that separate many of us. I give huge credit to the spirit of unconditional positive regard that the founders of the group hold all the learners in. No matter where we are in our journey with Sm'algyax and our own journeys of cultural reclaiming, the group leaders welcome and value us all. This is crucial to reawakening Sm'algyax in all indigenous languages, making people feel safe, welcome, and cherished as we do the hard work of learning a new language as adults. We are all paddling in the same canoe, are reclaiming what was silenced in our ancestors after all. This small but mighty group of language warriors has set a powerful precedent for us all. Toiksitniism to all my teedses. You have found a powerful formula. I know the ancestors are smiling at this good work. YM. So I had a really good time communicating with our members. We don't often talk about the impact on us. We tend to dive right into the work. I wish I had time to tell you about each of our learners and how far they've come, how much fun they are, how they encourage me and us to keep doing it. Look, look, I can das Golden Alley to Juneau Shamaic learners Shagitwan. I'm very fortunate to speak, to be the vessel for the voice of our language group today. I'm not our best learner, I'm not a linguist, I'm not a trained teacher. I do have a passion for our language, and I enjoy working with these folks so very much, and I'm proud of how far we've come. At Zixagodu, there was some Juneau Shamaic learners group. Wikwa at Zixagodu, the Sealaska Shamaic, there was some Luholtka Godu. Why? The other thing that I wanted to mention too is now that we're returning to normal, I suppose, after the lockdowns, it's been difficult to return to in-person meetings. I'm hoping we can do one this weekend. We kind of got used to the sitting in our recliners at home with a coffee pot on. But I really would like us to work on a hybrid meetings where we have a room full of learners. So if you're in Juneau, Lansam, and Doyek near some. I'm very happy to speak with you today. Waiwa. I believe it's got one more minute before it's question and answer time, but let's go ahead. Does anybody have any, or maybe some of our regulars if I forgot anything? Nancy?
I just thought maybe you might want to, a couple of things is our Rosita Worl.
Doikson. Nancy reminded me, and I forgot to put this in my notes. We aren't the only ones now doing Zoom remote meetings. There's a Sunday Sm'algyax, or Kíl and Sm'algyax partners have a Sunday Sm'algyax where they bring Sagolitaf, first language speaker. And I mentioned him before, and he's so very patient and so encouraging of us. That's on Sundays. Friday evenings, there's a Kahoot. It's a game, if you ever played the Kahoot game on your phone. And it's all in the language. Friday evenings at 6:30 Alaska time. And there's Raising Sm'algyax, which one of our founding members, Alex, started with Dr. D'Angeli, because they both have little ones, and they wanted to raise their little ones in the language. So they began this group where they translate lullabies, children's songs, sometimes children's books into our language, and they share them on Zoom. It's a lot of fun. I mentioned earlier, songs are a good way to learn. They get stuck in your head. I walk around singing them frequently. Am I forgetting any of the online groups? So we're not the only ones. There was a while during the lockdown where there was something every day. You could log on and do something every day. And Doix and Nancy. Oh, Waiwa, cool gold. Waiwa. Any questions, comments, soliloquies?
We had a few questions from our online chat. What do you want learners to bring to the table besides themselves?
Oh, that is a very good question. And I really like this part of having a group of learners from far and wide. We don't have to rely on the dictionaries as published. We've had learners come from other villages with other teachers, other accents, dialects, who've learned how to say things that you can't find in any dictionary. one that springs to mind is Lumen Benagodu. It means I'm so excited that my heart is racing. And one of our learners brought it forward and said, my mother used to say this, what does it mean? And so we had to ask around, and Bernice Bolton, fluent speaker in British Columbia, was able to answer that for us. And so we encourage everybody to bring forth these things that you heard as a child or from your teachers, wherever you're at, especially if they're not in the dictionary. It's a good way for us to all learn those things, to use them, and to keep them alive.
Can you say that phrase again?
Oh, Lumen Benagodu. Lumen Benagodu. It's the guttural G, go. Lumen Benagodu. What was the question again? What do I want learners to?
What do you want learners to bring to the table?
Oh. And definitely, we need more participants. So we want learners to bring themselves, bring their questions, bring their encouragement. Waiwa?
The next question we have is, what would you like to say to someone who might be interested in learning Sm'algyax on their own or their own language, but feel it's too late or have fears about starting?
Oh, that's a very good question too. When we first started, there were precious few resources for us to find, to learn. There are definitely a lot more now. There should be some links in the chat for things that we can provide. There are other dictionaries and other sources from British Columbia, our friends at the Hike Foundation. So there are other resources out there now. Even if you don't feel like joining us per se, you can always email us, ask us for help, direction. We'd be glad to point you to resources. But language is definitely a social thing. So I highly encourage people to find somebody to share our language with. And also, as adults and being afraid, we have a learner who's my elder, good friends with my mother, and he was one of those who got punished in school for using our language, and he could not physically make the sounds because of the intense shame, fear that's instilled in us. And I took a page from Juneau's guidebook on helping revitalize our languages. I heard Juneau once apologize to a group of people for what happened to them as children and give them permission to learn their language. So I did that. I went to him and I took his hand and I said, I'm sorry this happened to you. This should not have happened. In this room, in this space, you have permission to use your language. And we were both a blubbering mess. And then after that time, I heard him start speaking, and I could swear I was hearing my elders from when I was a child in his voice. So even though it feels like it's too embarrassing, scary, you may feel like you're too old to learn things, but you're really not. There's several of us middle-aged folks who are doing quite well. Did you have?
We have one more question. Could you speak on the importance of collaboration and the impact it has on the Sm'algyax community?
Oh, Doixon, that's a good question. Really, collaboration is key for what we do. Because we started with very little, we had to rely on each other to help remember the things that we learned, to help correct our pronunciation, to ask questions, to help us research things. And I mentioned language is very social, isn't it? You can't just go around languaging by yourself. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So collaboration allows this particular group to to continue. We rely on each other heavily. I'm the one who's not afraid to talk, so I'm not our best learner, but I'm usually up at the front of the room, blabbing away. But I'll always have to lean over and ask somebody, "Oh, you agree? Is that right?" And they can help me out. So collaboration in this instance isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely necessary.
Dwight should go for all that you do for us. I just wanted to mention, I always encourage some people that want to join our group. They're really, I don't know anything, and I say, even to some family members, I said, you could join us, turn your camera off, and put it on mute and listen. And with the idea that eventually they'll turn the camera on. And so I just wanted to encourage anyone online just to join and listen if you like, and it'll come later.
Oh, Dorix and Tsimshian. And that's a good point too. I remember when we first started learning together, we were scared. We didn't want to say anything wrong. We didn't feel like we knew anything. And we had precious few resources. So when the lockdown happened and we got a whole bunch of new learners, we already knew what they were facing. And we were fortunate to give them the tools that we wish we had when we first started to start. Like when we first started, we had a bunch of vocabulary and no idea how to put a sentence together and nobody to ask. But now we have regular conversations. So, Dorix.
Any other questions? In that case, thank you all for taking the time to listen to Alfie's lecture, and thank you, Alfie, for your wonderful lecture. Please join us for our next lecture in the school-based Indigenous Language Revitalization Models series, which will be presented by George Holly and Lori on September 26th. The lecture will be a focus on methods used to teach the Tlingit language and culture through music at Juneau Glacier Valley and Heen elementary schools. The project is collaborative and held up by a number of language speakers, teachers, learners, and music teachers who are committed to decolonializing and indigenizing the curriculum while teaching music through the Tlingit language. The teachers and children had not been in a language medium environment, and the language had not been used before to teach music in a school, so the entire team of teachers, advisors, and students had to build the canoe as they paddled towards a new and inclusive future. Thank you.
Sit near some.